The film opens in a woods in Ireland where a man named John is running frantically.
He soon arrives at a sign that states final turning point 108.
He continues to run, but quickly sees that he's been going around in circles from the beginning.
Unexpectedly, a group of crows appears, and he realizes it will soon be dark.
John becomes unnerved and attempts to climb a tree for cover, but he slips and falls.
Minutes later, a concealed animal appears and hauls him away.
In the following scene, we see an American girl named Mina working in a pet store in Galway.
Her supervisor gives her an important golden canoe parrot and requests that she deliver it to a zoo in Belfast.
Mina agrees, as she is also tired of sitting in the store all day. The next day, she departs for Belfast with the parrot. On the way, she gets a voice message from her twin sister Lucy, who reminds her of their mother's death anniversary.
She assures her it has been 15 years and asks Mina to move on from the incident and not blame herself.
While calling with updates, she also invites her to visit the family, but Mina seems uninterested.
Soon after, Mina enters a forest area with various signs of missing people and animals. Her radio then switches off on its own, and the vehicle comes to an abrupt stop. She attempts to restart the vehicle, but it doesn't work, so she gets out and starts checking around.
Mina soon finds a sign that states point of no return 12.
This causes her to assume that someone lives nearby, so she decides to go a bit further.
However, minutes later, when Mina turns around, she sees that her vehicle has disappeared. She becomes worried as she realizes dusk is approaching.
Not long after, she hears mysterious sounds coming from nearby, and the ground also begins to shake.
Mina then sees someone running and decides to follow them.
She eventually finds a lodge where an elderly woman informs her that she must enter if she wants to live. Hearing the creatures shrieking, Mina decides to trust the woman and rushes inside. Following this, the elderly woman introduces herself as Meline and introduces her to partners, Cara and Daniel. She explains that the lodge they are in is known as the Car, and that they have all been there for some time. The group then clasps hands and looks into what appears to be a two-sided mirror. Meline reveals that the creatures on the other side are known as the Watchers. They are woodland animals who visit the lodge every day to observe the inhabitants.
Since Mina is new, they position her before the mirror to welcome her. The Watchers apparently like her, and they give her a warm commendation and tell her to eat a piece of cake. The next morning, a confused Mina believes these people are crazy and decides to leave. She takes the parrot along with her and sets out to find her vehicle. However, she quickly becomes confused and unsure of her way. Mina arrives near a cliff where she is stunned to see the massive woods around her. This causes her to realize that it is impossible to leave on foot. Soon after, Meline finds her and requests that she return. She explains that they have all tried to escape, but the fog causes visual illusions, making departure nearly impossible. She also reveals that there are several final turning point signs in the forest that can guide them back to the roadster before nightfall. However, crossing the line means they cannot turn back. When Mina asks who set up these signs, Meline says they call him the Professor. With no other choice, Mina returns to the car and decides to stay with them. The next day, the group goes out to hunt for food, and during this time, she bonds with Cara. The latter confides that her husband John was with them until last week when he evidently went out for help. He is actually the same person we saw at the beginning of the film. Following this, Cara takes Mina to a massive tunnel where the Watchers reside. She explains that there are many of these throughout the woods and the Watchers cannot emerge during the day. When Mina asks how long she has been there, she replies that she and John arrived 5 months ago. Later, as they gather around the fireplace, Meline tells Mina about the rules of survival here. These include never turning your back on the mirror, never opening the door in the dark, occasionally showing your butt to the mirror at the stroke of midnight, avoiding the tunnels, and always staying in the light. The next day, Mina continues hunting duties with Daniel. He admits that he has been there for several years and has never seen a Watcher. Mina finds this strange and questions Medeline's honesty with them. She asks him to help her investigate the tunnels, and after some hesitation, he finally agrees. With Daniel's help, Mina uses a rope to descend into one of the tunnels. She then uses her lighter to illuminate the area and finds several old objects, including a newspaper, a broken camcorder, and some toys. Minutes later, a strange hand approaches and attempts to harm her, but before it can do so, Daniel throws the rope, allowing Mina to climb up with the items. In the next scene, Mina shows the items she has gathered and convinces the group to devise an escape plan.
Meline suspects Mina of breaking the rules, but she assures that she found the items in the forest.
At some point, Daniel fixes the camcorder and connects it to the TV.
They then decide to place it outside by the door to keep an eye on the watchers. Later, during dinner, the man approaches the door, coughing and knocking. They see his legs on the TV screen, and the man claims to be John. Meline is shocked and says it's impossible because no humans are spared after it gets dark.
She questions Mina, asking if she broke the rules, and the latter finally admits that she went inside one of the tunnels.
Meanwhile, Kiara wants to open the door for her husband, but Meline says it is a watcher in camouflage. Kiara then tests him by asking about the book she's currently reading, but the man can't answer. This finally makes her realize that the man isn't her husband. Before she can proceed with her next move, she is attacked by a watcher who also destroys the camcorder.
The next morning, the group gathers the items Mina brought and throws them into the tunnel.
Meline is enraged with her and orders her to stop endangering others' lives for her investigations.
Mina also grasps the gravity of the situation, so she vows to keep the rules from now on.
The scene then cuts to a flashback of Mina's childhood, on the day she lost her mother.
Her mother was driving the car while Mina and Lucy were playing in the back seat.
Everything was going well until Mina got her hand stuck in the window, and she started screaming.
Her mother looked back to check what was happening, but this made her get distracted.
The resulting impact immediately killed her, while the two daughters survived with minor injuries. Mina has been living with guilt since then and has struggled to move on.
She shouldn't blame herself. Every person who's ever driven a car in a movie has crashed it.
In the present, we see that many months have passed in the woods, and winter has now come.
Things have become increasingly tense for the group due to food scarcity.
Thus, Daniel and Meline habitually contend, and Kiara has become discouraged while missing her significant other. One evening, Daniel and Meline have one more heated argument. He becomes so irritated that he ties her up to a tree.
When Mina attempts to free her, Daniel grabs Kiara and locks the CP door, leaving the other two outside. The women beg Daniel to open the door, but he continues to refuse.
As darkness falls, Meline guides Mina to a makeshift shelter of branches where they can hide.
They then notice the watchers emerging for the first time. The creatures are tall, lanky, bug-like beasts that emit terrible shrieks. They stand by the window, frustrated by the two women's absence. Daniel informs them that the women are still outside and urges the creatures to hunt them down. The watchers seemingly agree and start wandering around the forest looking for them.
After they leave, Meline and Mina beat on the door again, begging Daniel to open it. When he refuses, Mina begins to confide in him about how she caused her mother's death.
She says that she is a terrible person, but Daniel doesn't have to be like her.
Moved by her words, he finally changes his mind and opens the door. Once inside, Meline reprimands Daniel for his actions before finally revealing the truth about the Watchers. She explains that they were once called fairies as they had wings and magical abilities, but now they have essentially become shapeshifters who have been observing and attempting to mimic humans. Meline also describes an incident when she saw a Watcher who closely resembled her, but in a distorted form.
While they are discussing this, the Watchers return to the CP and start beating on the door. This is the first time they are doing so, as the rules have been broken. The group even hears their own voices, revealing that the Watchers are quick learners. At this critical moment, Daniel discovers a trapdoor on the floor, which he quickly opens despite not knowing what's inside. They decide to enter the portal to protect themselves from the Watchers. Shortly after, the group arrives at a secret bunker stocked with food, books, sketches, and various notes on the creatures. Mina finds an old computer containing several videos of the professor. They discover that he is Rory Kilmartin, and he was studying the Watchers.
They then begin watching his video logs to learn more about their situation.
In one of the videos, the professor reveals that he arrived here in 2009 to study the Watchers. He mentions that these creatures often watch him through the glass and attempt to copy his actions. He further admits that he used some locals to build the bunker, which he called Wonderland for some creepy reason.
He then fed those people to the Watchers so no one would know about his experiments.
One day, the professor befriended a Watcher and gained its trust.
He used the creature in his experiments but couldn't achieve anything significant. After a year of studying the captured fairy, he realized he had become a monster by exploiting the lives of humans and fairies for his selfishness.
In his last video, the professor explains that anyone captured should go to turning point 134, where they can find a boat to escape across the river.
He also instructs the survivors to go to his university and dispose of the research papers.
The video ends as he takes a gun and heads upstairs to kill the captured fairy. 2 shots are heard, implying that they both are dead. The next day, the group follows the professor's instructions and uses the trapdoor to find the river at the forest's edge.
Along the way, Meline finds a sacred stone and explains that it represents the war between fairies and humans.
Once, they coexisted peacefully, but then the fairies became stronger and started to threaten other races, so the humans had to exile them to the underground.
Meline describes how the fairies were defeated, their wings removed, and they are now forever imprisoned in the forest.
Soon, the sky darkens and rain begins to fall.
The group arrives at the boat, but Daniel is suddenly approached by an injured man. He turns out to be a watcher posing as John, who asks for his help.
The others try to warn him that it isn't the real John, but it is too late. The creature soon reveals its true form and snaps Daniel's neck, killing him instantly. This frightens the women, but they have no time to mourn for his foolishness, so they get on the boat and escape. Since the river is just outside the forest, the watchers can only stare at them with terrifying eyes.
Hours later, the trio finally crosses the river and reaches a road. They then board the first bus they find and return to the city.
The scene then cuts to a few days later, where Mina visits the professor's university and examines his work.
His paper is titled The Halfling Predicament, which details the fairies and their history before turning into monsters. There are scrolls that indicate they once lived among humans as friends and even lovers.
Those born to humans and fairies became halflings.
These fairies were able to imitate humans and even take on the form of the deceased.
Mina then comes across a set of pictures that leave her in shock. In the next scene, she goes to Kiara's home and shares what she found. She shows her a photo that reveals Meline is actually the professor's wife. However, the most shocking truth is that Meline died from cancer in 2001.
Mina thinks that the person living in the bunker was a fairy imitating Meline.
She also theorizes that the professor was invested in his research because he was attempting to replicate his late wife. Hearing this, Kiara is stunned and asked how Meline could walk in the light.
Mina says that could be because she is half human.
At that moment, the real Kiara shows up at the house, which leaves Mina stunned. It means that she has really been talking to the Watcher.
Kiara goes into the house, but the Watcher immediately knocks her out. She then transforms into Mina's own form and attacks her. She reveals how the professor pretended to befriend her and then used her for experiments. When he attempted to dispose of her, she had no choice but to kill him.
The Watcher says that Mina will also betray her just as humans always do.
However, Mina begs her not to hurt her and reveals her status as a halfling. She explains to the Watcher that she can walk freely in daylight because she's half human. Mina asks the Watcher to let go of her hatred for humans, reminding her of how she protected them from other creatures in the forest. She tells her that despite all the wickedness, there is still humanity inside.
Mina is also hopeful that there are other halflings like her and urges her to seek them out so she won't feel lonely. Hearing this, the Watcher is puzzled and deeply emotional. She then miraculously regains her wings and the magic that was once taken from her by humans.
With her newfound freedom, she flies off to find the other halflings around the world.
In the final scene, Mina reunites with her sister, Lucy, after years of estrangement. This signifies that she has finally let go of her guilt and decided to move on in life. Mina shares with Lucy what she experienced in the forest. She reveals that she still believes the Watcher is protecting her like a guardian angel. The film then ends with a little girl watching Mina's house from the street, who is actually the Watcher in another form.